Hey everyone, it's Bob Crossan, Senior Managing Editor for Water and Waste Digest. I am joined today by Jon Freedman. He is Senior Vice President of Global Government Affairs for Suez. He also teaches a class at the University of Pennsylvania called The Future of Water. We're going to be talking all about the future of water, the regulatory frameworks that are out there, and some of the things that are going on right now in terms of trends. So, Jon, thanks so much for being here. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come here and for talking to us after your trip to Madrid.
Well, thank you for having me, Bob. I'm really happy to be here. And I love the way you worked my Future of Water title into your kind of segue for the show. That was great.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that is a lot of what we're talking about is that there's a lot of things going on in water right now that are going to have a massive impact on how the future of water looks in the United States. And I guess my first question for you is like, from a regulatory perspective or really any perspective, what do you see as being the current drivers that will drive that change? How are things looking right now in terms of the regulatory climate and just the climate of the water industry overall?
Well, great question. And I do think I'm happy to start with the regulatory climate because that's a huge driver. We can also talk about the legislative climate, Bob,
Yeah.
and if you want, even ESG trends, because I think, particularly on the corporate side of things, a lot of companies are kicking into gear in terms of water sustainability because of social license to operate issues.
Mhm.
But if we want to start with EPA or federal regulations, so really EPA to a great degree, they're doing a tremendous amount right now. PFAS is front and center in everyone's mind. That's probably a larger discussion. So let me just flag that and put it in the parking lot for a minute. Come back to that. Um, Most recently, April 5th, in fact, EPA released a memo which was its game plan for nutrient pollution. And they reference, hey, under Joel Beauvais, who was President Obama's assistant administrator for the Office of Water, and I think they even went back to an assistant administrator before Joel, that, hey, there have been these other initiatives around reducing nutrient pollution, but we're going to pick up that mantle and push it even farther ahead. And so EPA is going to work with the agricultural industry, which is a huge source of nutrients that go into bays and other receiving water bodies. They're going to work with states, and they're going to work under the Clean Water Act to try to limit the nutrients that get into our water bodies. So I think that's, I don't know exactly how that's going to play out yet. I don't think anybody does, but that's something to keep an eye on, particularly if you're a company like Suez Water Technologies and Solutions that makes membrane bioreactors that can remove nutrients from wastewater before they get discharged into rivers and bays. So that's a big item coming. Another thing is EPA's commitment to water reuse. So under the last administration, EPA released something called the National Water Reuse Action Plan. And at one point it had 41 action items that were to get the whole federal government working in concert with state governments, with NGOs and associations, and even the private sector to accelerate reuse in the US. The new administration, the Biden administration, has picked that up. And now I think we're up to 50, I don't know the exact number, but 50 plus action items, and they're still working to promote water reuse. So if you want to talk about that, we can go a little deeper there. That's a big issue. Um, PFAS, okay,
The
huge issue.
complicated mire of PFAS.
The complicated. Oh yeah,
Yeah, the complicated
it's a
mire.
really challenging issue. Um, So, EPA released, now this was in October 2021. So, what is that, like 6 months ago? Something like that. EPA released a game plan for dealing with PFAS, a roadmap. And in that roadmap, they said they're going to come out with a draft drinking water regulation by this fall 2022, and a final regulation by fall 2023. So we're under, I mean, typically for a new regulation, it can be 3 to 5 years, right? So we're in a really accelerated time frame for PFAS. And I think it's for a good reason. It's a contaminant that's got a lot of people concerned. So that's kind of, I think, the highlights of some of what we're seeing on the regulatory front.
You could deep dive on all of these for a long time. But for the
Yeah,
purpose of today, you mentioned the regulatory side. You said that you wanted to touch a little bit on the legislative side. Obviously, bipartisan infrastructure law, the funding that's out there right now is a big part of that. Could you talk a little bit about what you're seeing on that legislative aspect and kind of how that will influence the future of water here?
yeah, and Bob, I think on the legislative front, we're in digest mode, right? Because November 15th, 2021, President Biden signed into law this bipartisan infrastructure law. The acronym is IIJA, but we'll just call it the infrastructure plan. And there that plan had $550 billion in incremental funding, maybe 650, whatever it was, for infrastructure over 13 categories of infrastructure. The one that we're concerned about now is water, which is $55 billion over 5 years. And that money is going from Congress to federal agencies like EPA or the Bureau of Reclamation, and then from those federal agencies to communities that will be implementing projects.
Hmm.
So right now, I think we're in the phase of, okay, Congress did something historic the end of last year, and this year is about implementing that and making sure we get going in an effective and efficient way. Um, Lots of scrambling around on getting the infrastructure plan implemented. Um, uh, I think Buy America is ahead. There are a lot of tailwinds for communities across the country. I think Build America, Buy America is a headwind,
Hmm.
and that's also something the government is dealing with now.
Yeah, on that note, Build America, Buy America has become a big talking point lately. So technically went into effect on May 14th, although there's this whole waiver program that's kind of in play right now to handle things while guidance is still forthcoming. Um, but there is a lot of talking on that. Have you seen any impacts from that? Is that something that you and Suez have been kind of like helping to understand or work through with legislators and regulators to make sure that it achieves what it's setting out to do, but also isn't a hindrance to, like you say, being a headwind to actually getting work done.
Yeah. So let me start by just saying that I, I'm applauding our government, Congress, the administration, EPA, all the key agencies for all the work they did to get this infrastructure plan enacted. Right, it's great for our country and it's really needed. And so I don't want to sound critical at all. In fact, I'm extraordinarily complimentary of the government. The one thing that concerns me is this Build America, Buy America provision. And in effect, it's saying that the iron, steel, and manufactured goods that are made in America. So I think that complicates things for the communities across our country that so badly need to upgrade their infrastructure. And let's talk specifically about water and wastewater infrastructure, because now they have to be very careful in how they deploy the funding they're going to get from the federal government to make sure it's only used for things that are made in America, or they get an exemption from the government. And to get an exemption, they have to say, hey, look, those goods that we need are simply not available in the quantity or quality required for our project. Or they're available, but they're going to increase the cost of our project by 25% or more. Or there's some other public interest reason, which, unclear to me what that is. So it really, it kind of shackles these communities a little bit. They can't just necessarily pick exactly what products they want to use in their infrastructure, right?
Hmm.
And they have to pick products that might be far more expensive than what they were otherwise going to use. And And even if they want to apply for an exemption, that's a timely and sometimes costly process.
Mhm.
So it just adds a whole set of complications to getting this really great infrastructure plan implemented as quickly and efficiently as possible.
The final question here was to kind of pivot back to the infrastructure funding side of things and talking to you about how you guys are working with internal and external clients, meaning like within Suez or outside of Suez with your clients who are purchasing equipment. How are you guys trying to make sure that your customers are making the most of whatever funding they can find?
Yeah, well, the main thing is that on this funding that's coming from the infrastructure plan, to make internally to make sure that our business leaders know what streams of funding are out there, how much they are, when they're going to flow from the federal government to states and in turn states to communities, and so just general awareness. And in a lot of cases, Bob, we're already working with customers. We're piloting, we're demonstrating, our water reuse technologies, for example, in projects that are now going to apply for this infrastructure funding. So we've already been out there working with communities across the country who are now able to kind of capitalize on this funding and try to scale up from pilot to full mode. And in Los Angeles, do you know the city of Los Angeles announced a couple of years ago that they're going to recycle 100% of their wastewater by 2035? Did
Wow,
you
no, I
happen
didn't
to
know
see
that it was.
that? Mayor
I didn't know the
Garcetti announced
percentage
that.
was. Yeah, I did not know the percentage was that high. I knew that
Yeah.
they were
So
working toward it
in
though.
effect, I mean, Israel as a country had a national target of recycling 100% of its wastewater, and they're at 85 or 90%, right? And I think what they found, by the way, is that going that marginal extra 5 or 10% or whatever to 100%, it just wasn't cost effective, right? That didn't make sense. It's even cheaper to use desalinated water at that point.
Mhm.
But Los Angeles, in effect, has announced it's going to become an Israel and reuse all of its wastewater. And so we operate right now a wastewater reuse plant in Los Angeles that takes about 40 million gallons a day of Los Angeles City wastewater and treats it so that it can be reused to recharge the groundwater, aquifers, and also used for industrial purposes. And we are piloting right now in Los Angeles a reuse facility that will take Los Angeles County wastewater and treat it so that it can be reused. And they're talking about scaling that up to a 200 million gallon per day water reuse facility, which would be the largest in the country.
That's huge.
And they're also talking about applying for infrastructure funding to do that. So that's a great example of how the federal government can work with local governments to make a real difference in our country, putting us on a more sustainable path forward from a water standpoint.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, John, for taking the time to talk with us on all these different topics that, in their own right, should be their own interview. So, I appreciate getting a good high-level overview of some of these things and diving into some of the nuance that is involved in each of them as well. And for everyone who's watching, please check out the video description below. We'll have some links to some resources on our website. We'll also have some links from John and Suez, so you can check those out as well. And once more, John, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here and taking the time.
You're a great host, Bob, and I'm glad I could finally get on the show with you. Thank you.